It is my pleasure to be here introducing Ed Kruszynski. I'm Amilcar Chalou, the chair of the Department of History. I have met Ed, I think last year we met for the first time, and I've been captivated by his stories. Part of the stories we're going to hear today, and the family involvement as well, but also about his days here in BGSU. He's an alum of BGSU, and I was heartened, I would say, by not only the stories, but also about his love for BGSU, right? And that's something that to me is always the defining characteristic of our place, right? There's like this book I read a long while that the theme was love for people and love for place, and how the two things are connected, and that's something that strikes me about BGSU, how much the two things are connected. People love the place, love the people, and I think its experience always reminded me of that. Now, we are going to hear stories, different stories about love, actually, and about not love, right? Anyway, I think it's quite, to me, quite an important thing as a historian that is interested in the public service of history, to learn more about our past, and particularly about the things that happened, not just because they happened, because they shape us today. And how important it's today what happened back in the 1940s, right? Even today we are struggling to deal with the legacy of the Holocaust and World War II. Anyway, Ed is the author of two books, The Medic's Wife and Unbreakable, and the two of them, fascinating books. I read the first one, The Medic's Wife, and it's captivating. I'm looking forward to the second one, but it's hard to get it right now, right? Because it's top ranked in the Amazon sale list. Anyway, I don't want to distract anybody from the talk, and I thank you so much for being here. Anyway, let's. I don't know if the word will be enjoyed. Let's learn.
I'm supposed to say now a round of applause for your speaker. A couple of quick things. I've got a little raffle that we're going to do. So if you're on the sides, I'm going to need the folks to stand up and move in towards the center. It would be awkward if I stood right in the middle and talked. So this is like a little bit like church, but you got to come down. Please come down. Please come down, because it's an intimate discussion. But if you do come down, you get to fill out one of these, just your name, your first and last name, and you get a chance at some fantastic prizes at the end. Just grab one. Right, yeah, just nice. All right.
Do you have a pen? Oops, sorry. You need a pen? Yes.
You're making your way down. Thank you, thank you. And Tracy will come back and she'll collect all those. While she's doing that, I need a favor. I need a big favor from this group. I need you just for 1 second to stand up. Everybody stand up for 1 second. And you guys know the band Coldplay? Anybody raise your hand if you do. Has anybody listened to music if you don't know Coldplay? All right, let's say you've gone to your favorite concert, and I need you just to like you just got done seeing Coldplay, and you're like, yeah, yeah. When I tell you to do it, I'm going to count to 3. I need you to do it, and I'm going to take your picture, okay? 1, 2, 3. Yeah. One more time. 1, 2, 3. Yeah! All right. There we go. Thank you. That was a big favor. Let me tell you why I asked you to do that. So I have a nephew that goes to Purdue, Boilermaker. And he knew I was coming to Bowling Green, my alma mater, to give a talk. And over Thanksgiving, I told him I was talking at BG, and he calls me Unc. He goes, "Hey, Unc." He goes, "You any good?" Just like that. "You any good?" Like, I don't know, authors are usually introverted, but at the end of my talk, I usually get a standing ovation. That's not the end of the story. He says, "Hey, Unc, if you get a standing ovation, you come to Purdue and I'm going to buy all the beer that we're going to consume that evening." So I don't know if my talk's going to be any good, but I know I'm going to get my payload in beverages when I go to Purdue. So thank you for being a part of that. My name's Ed Kruszynski. I'm a Bowling Green grad. I sat in these chairs in 1980 to 84. And I will tell you, after you graduate, first of all, BG is the greatest, I felt the greatest college experience, and I've been to a lot of colleges that you could possibly have. Smaller campus, the people are super nice, you get to be a townie if you go to summer school. It was just a marvelous thing for me. And the best part is, I met my wife here. We're Falcon Flames. Tracy's around here somewhere. She's my partner in crime. We have 2 grown children and two grandchildren and 2 twin grandchildren on the way. So it's you go from these chairs and you blink your eye and your life goes by so fast. But I wanted to say, when I was a student, there's going to be 2 things that will plague all of you when you leave here and you have like 20 years under your belt. The first thing is you're going to remember where you were on the last day of your exams. So my exams, I don't know how I scheduled them this way. Most of them were on Fridays. And my buddies were all gone. I was studying in my dorm. And at the time, we had crock pots. I don't know if that's a thing. Is crock pot still a thing? With Dinty Moore stew. Anybody have any Dinty Moore? Or Chef Boyardee spaghetti. I'm there by myself. Everyone's either partying or home for the holidays. And I hear this song on the radio. And the song was Roxanne. You know Roxanne Sting? Roxanne. To this day, when I hear that song, I'm transported in time back to that day in like 1980 where I'm eating Dinty Moore stew with my crock pot last exam. So that's the first memory that you might remember where you were. The second one is the panic dream. You guys have that yet? The panic dream? Where you know you're supposed to be in English 101 or 201 or you're taking a history exam, but you can't find the class? Anybody have those dreams yet? Because if you don't, you're gonna. You're walking around campus, you know where you're supposed to be, but you can't find it and you miss it. You're not there. Well, those 2 things are gonna be those things that, even at this stage in my life, I still have those 2 memories and that one, not nightmare, but panic. That has nothing to do with history. That's just a life lesson. You don't have to write it down. So, first of all, I want to thank the History Department for having me here. I'm excited. This is not the first time I've been at Bowling Green talking about the Holocaust or World War II history. I was at the Wood County Library about a few months ago. Thank you. And I did a talk there. One of the things that I wanted to talk a little bit about is, so my family immigrated from Poland in the 1910, 1911. Anybody know what that time period was? It was a period of unrest in Europe. It was World War I. So my grandfather escaped from Poland before he got conscripted into the Tsar's army. If you were educated, which he wasn't, if you were educated, you only had to spend 6 years in the Tsar's army. If you were uneducated, it was 17 years. So he wanted to get out of there and he went to America. And then World War I broke out. World War II breaks out and my father gets drafted. He goes through war, comes back home. My mother and father didn't talk about the war at all. It's a common theme with World War II veterans, or any veterans. They just don't want to relive those experiences. But at the time, I was probably too immature to really realize the gravity of what a World War II experience was, or even what it was like to be a soldier. I didn't have the context. And I'll tell you why. I came from an older parent. So when my dad got back from the war, he and my mom started a family in 1946. I mean, you know, the soldier's been gone for a while. You know, his wife's back at home. They start their family right away in 1946 and 1947. So I have really old siblings. But then 14 years later, I come along. And I often wonder, like, you know, how'd you take the pedal off the gas there? Like, how did I pop out? And I had a great relationship with both my parents, but they were old. So I was born into like an older parent, but I didn't know any different. They were just mom and dad. But when I was 10, my dad was 54. When I was 20, my dad was 64. When I was 30, trying to have kids, and my dad was 74. When I turned 40, my dad wasn't around. And there were so many questions I had for him. There were so many things that I wanted to ask and regretted not doing. I didn't have the mental capacity to really appreciate the World War II generation, because when you're 20, you guys know, you're in college, you're doing your own thing. Even when I asked my parents about their war experiences, they didn't give much up to us. So eventually you stop asking. Well, you know, I had a huge void in my heart because of that. You know, I was 40 years old. I had 2 kids. I had a great career. But you know, I was kind of an orphan. I didn't have a father anymore. It's kind of young to lose your father. So I became kind of my dad's detective. I wanted to find out everything there was about my dad. And but the one thing that I wanted to do, but I wasn't able to do, maybe you've had the same experiences, I wanted to get in a time machine and go back to see when my parents were in their prime. Anybody want to do that? Get back and see where your grandparents were like in their 20s, or your mom and dad. I want to go back and see when they were in their prime. And obviously you can't do that because we don't have the technology to do it. Or maybe we do. So I was given a gift of 3 minutes to go back in time to see my parents when they were young, and when they were in their prime, and when the whole world was in front of them. This was, you know, during the war, before the war. You're gonna see a short 3-minute video, and the people in the video are gonna be 110 years old. That's how long ago that it was. The people in the video are gonna be 23 years old. So if you're between the ages of 20 and 30, just raise your hand. So these videos they're, you know, some are black and white, which makes people look older, but the people that you see in these videos are gonna be in your age group. And for 3 minutes, I got a chance to meet my mom and dad when they were in their 20s. couldn't think of a better Father's Day gift than that. And you know, that's the way I wanted to remember my parents in their prime. And you know, I don't know if you feel that way, but maybe every son thinks his mom's the most beautiful person in the world. We sure thought our mom was. So that's still a hard tugger for me. So thanks for watching that. The agenda today is, I've got about 45 minutes of material. I'm not going to give away too many story teasers. And then I'll take questions at the end for about 15 minutes. The Medic's Wife didn't start out to be a book. It started to be a detective story of me trying to understand what my dad did during the war. And I'll tell you, the one time that I do remember is, you know, I was 21, came home from college, and at that time, you know, you were able to drink beer at 18. They had, you know, different rules. But at 21, I wanted to, you know, buy my dad a drink. I was 21. So he took me to the VFW in my hometown of Brecksville, Ohio. And, you know, my dad was a war veteran, but he was a dad. I mean, we didn't like call him Sarge. But when I walked into the VFW, everybody there did. And they made a path for Sarge. And he had his own chair at the bar. And it dawned on me that they're treating him different. It wasn't like he went into Cheers and it was Norm. This was a reverend, you know, like Sarge. When he walked in, my dad always walked in, he generally had his hand in his pocket, didn't say much, and he, you know, went to his chair. During the course of that, you know, a couple of beverages, people were coming up to me and saying, "Your dad, you know, geez, you should have heard like what he and his platoon did during the war." Every time I asked, he didn't want to talk about it, but he would talk about it with his fellow veterans. But I walked away from there. You know, I came back up here. I went to class and always had the memory, but I never followed up on it. And life just gets in your way, right? It just does. So I always remembered that. I'm like, well, you know, we talked to our mom, like, what did Dad do, or what did you do? And man, it was clamps on that. And I'll explain why in a few minutes. But this is a story about a band of World War II combat medics and the spry widow that ensured their sacrifices were not forgotten. And it started out as a keepsake for my family until a few events occurred. But before I get into the events, I wanted to get into who endorsed this book. So the person on the right is Robert McDonnell, and at the time that Barack Obama was president of the United States, he brought in Robert McDonnell as cabinet member for Veteran Affairs, VHW, what's the hospital? The Veterans Hospital? He was cabinet member in charge of Veterans Affairs, which included the Veterans Hospitals. It was interesting. I sent the summary to Bob, and I was trying to find his phone number. You know, I'm just a guy. You know, I wasn't a writer at the time. I just wanted to know what was going on with my dad, and I got a hold of him, I got his number, but I didn't realize I got his number, his cell number. So I call, and he answers, like, talk about getting your 30-second elevator pitch going. And I'm like, oh, it's me, Eddie Kruszynski, Brecksville, Ohio, World War II, and he's like, send me the synopsis. So I sent him the synopsis. 48 hours later, he said, I'm in. And he was the first one to endorse the book, a cabinet member of the United States. So my coaching to you is, if you don't swing for the fence, you're never going to get the hit. This guy got back to me, and he's a cabinet member. So, you know, that was the first learning as I went through this process is, you never know who's going to support you when you need it. The second group that supported my parents' story is the Holocaust and Humanities Center. My dad was in 5 concentration camps, not as a prisoner, but as a medic. And the Holocaust Museum had me on a few times talking about his experiences that he wrote down in a journal that we didn't know that we had at the time. Jackie Congito, who's the CEO now, wrote, "The Medic's Wife is a testament to the strength and resilience of the human spirit in the face of the unimaginable." And it really was the unimaginable. I mean, here's the unimaginable. All of us. Our lives are pretty easy. They really are. Compared to what this group went to. When you think about what a world war means, it's a cliche. It's a chapter in a history book. The Holocaust is 2 pages in a history book. The World War meant every country was at war. That's what it means. There were 35 countries at war. Could you imagine the 24/7 coverage of that? Think about it for a minute. We didn't have to deal with that. These 23-year-old kids had to deal with that. I didn't know that book trailers were a thing. Apparently they are, and this was ours. So we launched the trailer in September of 2023, and the book shot up through the ranks, and it was a real surprise. Kid from Bowling Green State University writes a book about his mom and dad. I've read those 2 books that were, at the time were number 2 and number 3, Unbroken. Anybody read that? Yeah, pretty good, right? Gold Soldiers. Anybody read that one? Yeah, that was a good one too. My parents' story, I wish they were around to see it, but it hit number 1 for 6 weeks. It was incredible. And the feedback was, it's not a story of war, it's a family story of what war does to a family. War does a lot to a family. It solidifies the bonds within the people inside the family. War also can mean that you don't say everything that went on during the war, even to your most closest confidant. So my parents had secrets. Your parents have secrets. You have secrets. So that's why the book's called Love, War, and Secrets, because not everything was known to us. Our parents were good parents, but they had secrets. And now I'm going to reveal all my mom and dad's secrets. So when I started this book, I really liked the movie The Titanic. Do you guys remember that one? James Cameron's version of Titanic. Do you remember the beginning scene? You guys remember? Old Rose is out there, and she's talking to her granddaughter. Remember? And then Old Rose starts, and then it goes down. It goes back in time to Young Rose. So it's Leo DiCaprio and who is the female lead? Blanking. Kate Winslet, right? And then at the end, it comes back to Old Rose, and she's got that blue diamond. Remember that blue diamond? And she threw it in the ocean. So I like that sequence, so I framed up this story as my mom would shoot me. Old Mary starts, goes to Young Mary, and then goes back to Old Mary, and that's how I created the timeline of the story. And it all started with a flood in 2006. Was that? Well, I don't know. See, that would be what, almost 20 years ago. It was an incredible flood. My mother's condo was just behind these. This is a lumber yard that was built on silt. The water rushed so hard through the town that the silt gave way. All the lumber went up underneath an underpass and created a tremendous flood. The whole city was underwater. My mom at the time was 86 years old. She was about, I'd say 4'11" tops, but she was tough. I had a tough mom. So tough she beat me in arm wrestling when I was 14 in front of my friends. That became my lifelong penchant for working out. Yeah, true story. She beat me twice and then gloated. But this was her condominium. The red line was the water line. So imagine her trying to make it to the door. Her condo was starting to fill up. Everything, furniture, the tables, the chairs, everything in her condominium basically was destroyed. It was 100% ruined. She didn't care about any of that. She was fighting for her life, trying to get to the front door. This kid, call him a kid, in the middle, heard my mother's screams. And he wades into this morass of water, and he piggybacks my mother out of there. And at the end of the year, he and his father saved 8 other people from the flood, and they became citizens of the year in my hometown. And really brave people. You never know what you're capable of until you're thrust into extraordinary circumstances. But it turns out, this is the start of the secrets. Mary is the little old lady there by the cooler. That's like the day after we were allowed back into the condo complex. My mom was of the generation of the Depression, where they hid money everywhere. So she was really agitated that day, and she was telling my brother and sister, now you gotta get back in the condo, because I got $10,000 wrapped up in my bedroom, and it's in a cardboard box, and you gotta go find it. She was panicked. And then she brings out a little card, and she goes, just like this. Oops. Ooh. I think 20 years ago I could have done that better. She does this. She gives me a map. She goes, there's $100 underneath the drawer in the kitchen. There's another $100 in the Bible in our bedroom. You know, she gave me like a map of like 5 different locations. But she goes, the big wad is in the bedroom in a cardboard box. So we're sloshing through her bedroom, and we see this box, and she's behind us, and we're like, we found the money, but we couldn't find it. We found it, but we're like, where is it? It was tied in rubber bands in 2 Walmart bags. $10,000 tied up, stuffed in Walmart bags, in a box. Pretty secure. She didn't care about the money. She wanted what was on top of those bags of money. You know what was on top of those bags of money? 2 photo albums. 2 albums. At the end of your life, when you're 86 years old and you've lived a good long life, the only thing that matters, at least to her, maybe to you, you won't know until you get there, is those photo albums. That was her life. That was also the 2 albums that contained an ungodly amount of information that nobody in my family knew about. That's the secret. She wanted those photo albums. That was her bedroom. We slogged through it. Inside those photo albums were a treasure trove of materials. My dad's World War II journals, we had all these photographs, newsletters, love letters back and forth, newspaper clippings, and they were all waterlogged. Everything was waterlogged, most of it was destroyed, but enough of it remained where we were able to pull the story together. And this is a funny first secret. So my brother and I are going through these albums. Now they're all waterlogged, and we're asking the jillion questions because we haven't seen any of these pictures of our parents when they were younger. Well, my dad has been passed away, and my mom's 86. So there's a picture of my mom, 2 pictures on a swing set. She's probably like 17 or 18, and we're like, that doesn't look like our dad. Who's that guy? So my mom, we're like, Mom, I'm like, who's that guy? And you know what she said? She goes, I was young once. And that was it. Couldn't get anything out of her, but like obviously that was not our dad. But we had all of these things, and she spent the rest of her time, she lived till she was 94, she spent the rest of her time trying to restore all these photographs. Because to her, that was more than money could buy. 6 years later, she goes into a nursing home. She's 93. She meets her best friend, who's 92, who, in her opinion, was older than dirt. So these 2 ladies, when it was Christmas time, they did ugly sweaters. The lady her name was Maggie O'Sullivan. During St. Patty's Day, they wore green sweaters, and they had a blast. And one of the things that they love to do is go to the library. And one day, they both had library cards. One day at the library, there was a poster that said that there are historians at the library that are videotaping World War II testimonies. And they wanted to preserve all the veterans' testimonies because these veterans were starting to pass along. And so my mom wanted to do that for my dad, and she filled out the form, but they turned her down. And she was devastated. But remember I told you my mom was tough? So she decides, I'm gonna do it, she's gonna do it on her own. She's gonna tell the story on her own. And she's 93, and she was gonna videotape the story on one of these. 93-year-old lady on one of these. So she and her friend get a bunch of questions together, and they start filming. And this is where it starts to get interesting. So now we're going to go back in time. 1940. This is Mary Kruszynski on the right. She's 21 years old. These are her friends. She meets this handsome guy. He's 22, it's 1940. They have the whole world in front of them. And they start dating in 1940. In February of 1941, Ed Sr. gets a notice in the mail. It's a draft notice, selective service. It was dated February 7th, 1941. If you read a little further down, he needs to show up for his physical 6 days later on February 13th. It's not a lot of time between getting this letter and going to get your physical. And then it gets serious. If you actually look below that, you can go to prison if you miss your physical. So, the United States wasn't kidding around. That's how he got his draft notice. Now, the most important thing here, like for us, chronologically wise, is remember February 1941. Just remember that date for a minute. That was the date that kind of took the trajectory of millions and millions of Americans a different direction. There's one thing that the United States is notorious about getting before you end a calendar year, or before you go to basic training, and that is you got to pay your taxes. So this is my dad's tax form from 1940. It's one page, and he owed like $4.17 that year. I only bring this up because when you graduate and get your first jobs, your tax form is not going to be one page. So the way it worked back in 1941, at least in April, is the United States was not at war. We weren't at war. So, but the United States was preparing for war, and they drafted all these young Americans to do 18 months of training to create a reserve army. So my father was under the impression that he was going to be in training for 18 months, and then once he learns the trade of being a soldier, he would go back and restart his life. And one of the unique things that I found interesting in the research is back in 1941, our government was not prepared for war. So these uniforms they didn't have uniforms for these guys. These are World War I uniforms. So this is these uniforms are 40 years old. They must have been in a warehouse. But all the basic trainees, all the draftees, they wore these uniforms. And then the interesting thing about this picture is I like the guy next to Ed Sr. He's got his head down. This is probably the last place that he wants to be right there in that photograph. You learn how to shoot a weapon. My dad was good at both right hand and left hand. Communication equipment training. Running long distances with gas masks on as part of your training. There was a gas that wasn't used that Adolf Hitler and his gang invented. It was called sarin gas. Anybody know what sarin gas is? It's colorless, it's odorless, you don't know when it gets deployed, but it's a nerve agent and you don't live very long, and it's an uncomfortable way to die. So these guys went and did gas mask training, and obviously they did it with tear gas. So there's a funny part in the book of my dad and his platoon, and they're like, what do you want us to do? We're not going to see it. And there's kind of an anecdote in there with his training. My parents, so they dated for 7 months. For the next 9 months, my mother went and visited my dad 3 times. Only 3 times in 9 months. Dated for 7, visited 3 times in 9 months. Instrumental to the story is the person to the right with the camera. That was an Army Corps of Engineers signal photographer. This guy was assigned to my dad's platoon throughout the war, and that is the reason why we have over 250 photographs as a family of my dad's service in World War II. It's because of that gentleman there. December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor gets attacked. There's no 18-month reserve anymore. You're going to war. So you got to make a critical decision. So first of all, we're talking about war, but we're also talking about human beings. You know, a 23-year-old male and 22-year-old female that dated 7 months, saw each other 3 times in 9 months. So I'm going to have you guys, pretend you're 23 or 22, and you tell me if the male goes on his knee and proposes to his girlfriend for marriage, you want to get married, how many of you would say, yes, I'll marry that guy? Just raise your hand so I can see. What? All right, so you're 23 years old. How many of you would say, no, I'm not going to marry that guy? All right, well, that was a dilemma, right? So think about your parents or your grandparents, and let's just say you said, yes, I'm going to marry that guy. You go to your mom or your grandparents. Raise your hand if your grandparents would say, I wholly endorse that. Nobody, right? And that's why nobody came to my mom and dad's wedding. They got married anyway. And they got married because they felt like if they were living in the moment, and if whatever happened, happened, but at least they would get whatever time they would have left together. Importantly, my mom was with my dad 18 months before he got deployed out, so she knew everybody that was in my dad's platoon, both their husbands, their wives, their friends, and it was a great time in the United States, actually, to be during that period. Unprecedented level of patriotism in the country. Think about how we felt, 9/11. I mean, everybody was like, galvanized against a single goal. Well, that's the way it was in the United States back then. So they get married. 1943, there's a presidential motorcade that comes through to inspect the troops. It's President Roosevelt, and here he is shaking hands with the sergeant in my father's platoon. October 1943, it's time for my dad to get deployed. He has to go find my mom. He gets 6 hours from the time he was told to the time he has to leave. So he fills out his last will and testament with his friends, and kisses his wife goodbye, and goes across the ocean to be a soldier. In the meantime, Mary Kruszynski goes to Maple Heights, Ohio, and she works for a company called Jack and Heinz. She works for the Department of Defense as a fighter aircraft parts inspector, and she took her job seriously. She worked 7 days a week, 12-hour shifts, 1 day off a month. Imagine that. 7 days a week, 12-hour shifts, 1 day off a month. That was her job. And she did that for 3 years. In the meantime, my father sails to Europe on the SS Monterey. And they pack you in there. That's what it looks like in the bottom compartment with all the soldiers. My father writes my mother a letter, and in the letter he mentions a person that was referenced to him. That was Vice Admiral of the ship. And the person that he references is the jumper on the left. And he references that I met this guy named Jerry, great guy. He's a little older than us, he's 38. He played football for Michigan, he was their center. Super guy, he enlisted. Anybody have a clue who that person would be? Gerald R. Ford, 38th President of the United States. He was a vice admiral of this ship and an anti-aircraft commander of the ship. And for those of us who remember Chevy Chase on how, he kind of made fun of Gerald Ford because he tripped. Gerald Ford was anything but a buffoon. That guy was a legitimate war hero. And if you ever get a chance to Google Gerald Ford's war history, he did the Noble course. He pardoned a president. Gerald Ford was only president for maybe 16 or 17 months. It was a tough, rough time for him there. But during the war, the guy was revered. Complete hero. The same ship, my mother, the reason why this stayed intact the way it did, this is one of the few things she had in a plastic bag she kept for over 40 years. It's just a picture of my father that for one pack of cigarettes, you could get your picture made. June 6, 1944, D-Day. My dad's platoon on D-Day, their job was originally to be attached to an infantry unit. Did you ever see Private Ryan? Okay, so it's hell. His medical platoon is attached to an infantry unit. They're storming the beach, and they got to get to the cliffs. If you can get to the cliffs, you can at least get away from the line of fire. 12 hours before they deploy out, they get new orders, and they're now part of a naval assignment. And his company commander at the time made a decision that he felt like if we picked up the wounded on the beach and then went back in the channel, we'd have a better chance of staying alive, because the Germans were trying to, they were trying to machine gun down all the soldiers that were running in the beach towards the cliffs. But the commander made this decision: we're going to go with the Navy, and we're going to get on the beach, administer aid, and then get the hell off. Well, on paper that seemed like a great thing to do, but you guys know in war things don't really turn out the way they're supposed to. This is just a picture of a medical convoy going across the English Channel, and when they land, they see really what's going on. And this is a short video, but there's only some rare footage of D-Day. There's not a ton, and this is one of the few that is pretty sought after. It's silent. Now put yourself in that for a minute. 23 years old, your job is to get the wounded. Well, how can you tell? The difference between Saving Private Ryan and this footage is that they were all actors in Saving Private Ryan. These were real people that had real lives. This is what D-Day looked like from an aerial view. I didn't know what those balloons were on top. Anybody know what those balloons are?
Dirigibles.
Dirigibles. They are dirigibles. What was their purpose? Anybody know?
Strafing.
That's exactly right. So the Luftwaffe couldn't fly that low to strafe. They'd get hung up in these balloons and these wires up there. That's why you see them all up like that. So my dad's platoon, they're on the beach, take care of the wounded, get off the beach. They take the wounded and they put them on boats that are open, and this is what it looks like when you take wounded soldiers back across Normandy to the English Channel. So it's bad enough to do that once. My dad's platoon got called back 8 times to go back to the beaches of Normandy. On D-Day, D-Day +2, D-Day +6, all the way through D-Day +25. That's a long time to be in that situation. Now it got better, but still, my dad's platoon was ordered to take those multiple trips. How do we know that? Because they documented it in a Stars and Stripes article. This is Corporal Hartman, who worked for my father, and he recounts this Stars and Stripes person, reporter. This is the first time that he's ever seen combat. And by this time, Hartman, this is like his 5th or 6th trip. He's like, look at that torpedo going past. you know, just like a dolphin, look at her. You know, and this guy, he's got his camera and he's, you know, he's all bundled up and, you know, terrified. But in this article, it explains that this platoon went back to the beaches of Normandy, not once, not twice, but 8 different times. So after Normandy, the next battle is the Battle of the Hedgerows. And hedgerows, if you know World War II history, the Germans had 4 years to configure these hedgerows. These were not just like bushes, like, you know, like you walk past on your way to class. These were big, strong, gnarly, you know, bushes that were hard to get through. But the Germans had tunnels underneath these bushes, and they could rotate people and ammunitions and go in different areas. So what they wanted to do is funnel all the American troops into these narrow roads, so that they're in the bushes and they take their machine guns and they just. So in my dad's journal, he said, "Hey, we didn't have to deal with too many amputations on this round of the wounded. The Germans did it for us. Cut them right in half, and that's what it looked like." And the interesting thing is, like, for me personally, you know, I'm a 63-year-old man, and I have a son that's this age, or I did at the time, and you know, they're just so young, and you can't tell because it's black and white. But I don't know if I would have been that age, if I would have been able to do what these people were being asked to do. I'm not sure. I'd like to think I was, but I just don't know. So after 20 days, my dad reports in his journal that he hadn't taken a shower in 20 days. His uniform was basically a bloody sponge, and it's not like they had a Holiday Inn Express or Falcon Plaza to go take a shower. They found streams, and you know, this is how they took care of themselves with soap and the other things. And I hope you find this funny, because I do. My sister's looking at this, and you know, these are first time I'm seeing these pictures, and they're really small. We're blowing them up, and my sister Doreen says, "Hey, you know what? You're gonna have to block out, you know, Dad." I'm like, well, you know, because you know, you gotta block out his dingling is what I think is exactly what it was. So we blocked out Pop's dingling. So at this point, the Americans are going through France and they're liberating cities every day. And the French people are going crazy. You know, they're liberated, they're rid of the Germans, rid of the tyranny. And by Thanksgiving, the Americans are thinking, hey, we're winning this war. We're going to be going home soon, probably by Christmas. So we just had Thanksgiving, so I put a little video together on what it was like in World War II during Thanksgiving. That's what it was like for Thanksgiving. And does anybody know what happened between Thanksgiving and Christmas, 1944? Battle of the Bulge, maybe? Have you ever heard of the Battle of the Bulge? Yeah. Battle of the Bulge was the single largest German offensive of the war. They threw their entire army at the Allies, and they caught us all by surprise. The weather really aided the Germans. It was cold, it was foggy, it was dark, dank, and snowy, and the American bombers couldn't lift the planes from the airports to bomb the German positions. So the Germans were just going right through. And the reason why they called it a bulge is they pushed the front lines deep back into the territory. So we were losing a war. And if you ever saw a Band of Brothers, the Battling Bastards of Bastogne, this is them going into Bastogne. Bastogne was an important part of World War II because it was a mountaintop town, and if you took over Bastogne, you took over the supply routes. They had 5 roads going in, and whoever had it could control the supply routes. That's why Eisenhower said, we got to defend Bastogne all out, and that's why they asked the 101st Airborne, the Band of Brothers, to go in and hold it. And those guys, they held it, but they held it at an extreme cost. They ran out of food, they ran out of bullets, they ran out of ammunition, they were running out of each other. And one of the, if you remember the miniseries, Dick Winters had a direct report. He's like, we're surrounded. We're surrounded. This is disaster. The Germans are all around Bastogne. We're so surrounded. And Dick Winters is like, snap out of it. We're paratroopers. We're supposed to be surrounded, right? We drop into enemy territory. They're all around us. So get over it. This is our job. And by God, they held. And that was the turning point of the war. There's my dad's platoon in Bastogne. This is what Bastogne looked like just as the Germans were evacuating the town. Most of the vehicles in Bastogne were medical vehicles. It was a bad situation there. It's glamorized in the Band of Brothers, but you know, my experience is, you know, you're not going to see the worst of the worst in those episodes. So they had to stay another Christmas, and since it is Christmas, this is Christmas 1944. In Christmas 1944, my dad was in a German billet in Bastogne. There was a concrete firing nest that was used by the Germans. He was in there with 18 of his buddies. The sole purpose of that that building was to kill people, and that's where he spent Christmas 1944, in that building. The Americans and the Allies start turning the tide on the Germans. By March, we get into Germany. My dad goes through the German border. At the time, the German army, the Luftwaffe, he had to cross the Rhine. At least in my dad's platoon, he could cross the Rhine. The Americans deploy fog to get all the tanks and all the munitions across these rivers, and that's the Luftwaffe. They're kind of like firing in the dark. But the reason why they use the smog machines is cover. People still die because, you know, the random mortar shells still strike. And that's what happened to some folks in my father's platoon. Tragedy struck in 1945 in April, going over the Rhine. That's a spoiler, so I can't really say. You have to read the book. You think you've seen everything until you've gone into these concentration camps. So in April, Auschwitz was liberated. And Auschwitz was in Poland. And that's when the Americans were the world was starting to get a sense that this doesn't seem right. You know, we have these concentration camps, but we thought they were like prisoner of war camps. You know, there were rumors that these were camps that were really ill-treating the inmates and the prisoners, but it wasn't really until the camps were liberated that it got broadly known that these are death camps. Some of them are death camps. In 1945, my father's map has him going into the Buchenwald concentration camp on April 17th, 1945. They liberate the camp, you know, they see the prisoners, at the time, you know, we've all seen the photographs, right? Have you guys seen the photographs inside Holocaust camps? They're not pretty, right? But they're photographs. They're on a piece of paper. They're on, or not anymore. They're on Google or they're on images, and they're people that you don't know. You don't know these people. Your heart goes out to them, but you don't know any of them personally, right? Until you actually do. So that's my dad. He's 25 years old. Goes into Buchenwald concentration camp and sees his job was to inspect the camp inspector. And every morning when prisoners died in their barracks, they were hauled out on the outside of the building, and they were kind of stacked up in cordwood. And then a big wooden, not sleigh, but like a carriage would come by. They'd stack the bodies onto the carriage and take them to the crematorium or to large pits. My dad went into each one of these hospital barracks. And you know, again, you're like, one of the reasons why I published the book was because of this picture. You know, when you see something like that, you don't, you know, Tracy and I are grandparents, and now we have twins on the way. And I want the twins to, not only to know their ancestors' story, but I want a more kind and compassionate place for them to grow up. And the only way you can do that is through history. So if you don't know your history, how can you help prevent some of the things that occurred? It's not always easy, and it's difficult to figure out, but you got to keep telling the stories. So this is a hospital ward, believe it or not. So you would think, why did the Germans have a hospital when they're trying to kill all of these Jewish people? Well, according to their records, remember the Germans, this was their secret. They didn't want anybody to know this. So they had records that we had a hospital. We had a hospital in all of these camps. So if you were sick, you could go get treatment in the hospital. Really, there was no treatment here. It was basically a quarantine. And you know, the Germans didn't want to get typhus or TB or any of the diseases, so the really sick went to these hospital cribs to die, is basically what it was. Eisenhower visits the camp, and this picture says it all. He's right in the middle. He's got his arms on his hips. If you actually take a look at his face, he's still, I don't know what adjective you would give it, incredulous, shocked, disappointed, anger. I mean, it's unbelievable that this actually happened. And a lot of people say, well, the Holocaust, it happened a long time ago. It was 80 years ago, the Holocaust. Why are we still talking about it? Well, in my lifetime, even though I'm the youngest in the family, it was only 17 years. I was only born 17 years after the Holocaust. So it's not that far away, at least in my lifetime. Is that true? Does that come true?
Oh, yeah.
Get the films, get the photographs. Sorry. May Hitler dies. My dad writes a letter, I'm coming home, war is over, victory in Europe. You know, get the kibasi and the sauerkraut ready because Big Ed Kruszynski's coming home. He writes, America celebrates, this is Times Square. My dad gets reassigned to 4 other concentration camps. He doesn't go home in May. He doesn't go home in June. He doesn't go home in July, August, September. He goes home October after visiting 4 more camps. So think about this for a minute. You just saw probably 50 people, 50 inmates. When Dachau was liberated, they set free 32,000 people. Isn't that great? 32,000 people lived. But think of what those 32,000 people were. They were human husks, skeletons. They needed treatment. They didn't know how to treat them initially. They weren't war wounds in the sense of war injuries. You know, some people would say it's you guys get it. My father was home. Who's been drinking back there? What kind of wine is that? This is, my dad says goodbye to his platoon. This is one of the last pictures before he sets out for sale. For sale. Yeah, for sale. Not for sale. He sets sail. He sets sail. So why did the VFW guys give my dad a wide berth when we went and got beers in 1980? It's because this guy was got 5 bronze battle stars, 1 silver star, won the Meritorious Achievement Award, which is similar to the Legion of Honor for an individual soldier. He was in 5 major battle campaigns. He was in 5 concentration camps. Let me tell you the difference between, like, anybody see Chris Kyle, American Sniper? You see that really good, right? That counted as 1 major battle, like when he was, deployed in Fallujah. That was considered a major battle. So think about these guys that actually landed on the beaches of Normandy. If you were to live, you went through 5 Fallujahs, or 5 Vietnams, or 5 Korean Wars. That puts it in perspective on what these individuals had to endure during their 3 years overseas. Now we get to the ending. My dad comes back. He wasn't the same person. How could you be? Think about, from my mother's point of view, she'd only been with him 18 months, dated for 7, saw him 3 times in 9 months, and then they lived together for 18, and then didn't see each other for 3 years. So I think she was expecting there'll be some bumps along the way. There were more than some bumps along the way. And if I told you, I'd give it away. I'd give the secret away. At the end, my mom made a vow to my dad. She delivered, at least, maybe it's an ethnic thing, but these women can deliver tough love like nobody else. I mean, like, if you caused my mother to say the rosary for you, you were in trouble. There were a few times where I came home and she's all of a sudden saying the rosary to me, like pointing at me. So she was very religious, and she decides to break one of their vows, my parents' vows. Just before she dies, she uncorks the vow, uncorks the story, the entire story, for the entire world to know, which is now in the book called The Medic's Book. And she wanted the world to remember the best parts of humanity and the worst parts of humanity. And that was her gift back to the entire family. They were married for 50 years. The biggest compliment you can get are people that write and tell you how the story affected them. The most frequent comment that I get is, your book helped me understand why my parents never talked about their time in the war. And this book helped explain why that was the case. Sorry about that, I got caught up. So, I thought that was the end. I thought I was going to dismiss the class, go take your finals. But it's not the end. There was an amazing thing that happened. There was a Jewish Holocaust survivor named Raphael Cantor. His family read The Medic's Wife. They contacted the Holocaust Museum, who contacted me. I had coffee with Ron Cantor, the son of their Holocaust survivor. And we realized that our fathers were in Buchenwald on April 17, 1945. My dad as a medical observer, and his dad as a Jewish prisoner. He was in this building, this very building. That's what he looked like when he got liberated. 12 weeks after he was treated medically, he was liberated. That coffee meeting that I had with Ron Cantor led to 2 years of learning about Raphael Cantor, which turned out to be the book Unbreakable that launched 6 weeks ago. This is his parents' cemetery. Raphael Cantor left his family, real similar to mine. His dad talked about the Holocaust, but left a 20,000 word memoir to his family after he passed away. I don't know why he didn't want to leave it before, but after he passed away, Ron, who's to my left, he's the one who got the memoir. And this is his parents' grave. This was the day that the book was published honoring his parents. So now, that's the almost end of the story. Except, you have to still do a movie trailer for a book. So this is the book, this is a movie trailer for Unbreakable. Two things before I conclude. Raphael Cantor grew up in Czechoslovakia, Poland. There were 40,000 Jews in Czechoslovakia, Poland. When he went back to look for his family, there were only 345 Jews that made it back out of 40,000. I don't know how big Bowling Green is. 2 Bowling Greens, 18,000 times 2. Could you imagine coming back to Bowling Green and only having 345 people around? There were more because there were, Polish residents, but that's what happened. All right. Now, here's the irony of all this. Unbreakable shot up to #1 hot new release on Amazon. And it's been out in the market 6 weeks, and if you go on Amazon and Google it, I can't help it, I do it like 100 times a day. It's #2 today. But it's still something that a person that was sitting in your chair 45 years ago is talking to a group of students with a #1 selling book. You can do anything that you want to do in this life. The best thing to do is be an upstander. I don't know if you know what that term is, but if you see something wrong, stop it. That's really it is. Do the right thing. So I'm going to conclude with our raffle. We're done now. We're done. This is the part where you clap it.